First order of business, yes, I still have the beautiful balloon song stuck in my head. Been about 72 hours now. A bit of a rough go at times, if I'm being honest, but I'm hopeful it'll run its course in the next couple days or so. The point being, never let it be said that I don't suffer for my art. Next order of business. Hey, China! Are you guys taking detailed notes here? Because on the grand stage of international strategic brinkmanship, Joe Biden just sent you guys a very important message. And the message says, if you or any other hostile foreign power sends an aircraft on an incursion into U.S. airspace, be assured that our response will be weak, feckless, and 4 days late in coming. In fact, we won't take any action whatsoever until you guys have had a chance to just mosey your way across this whole big, wide continent, real leisurely and casual-like. You know what's most amazing about this? China gave you a layup, Joe. This should have been impossible to screw up. Even for you. You had the chance, possibly the best chance you will ever get as president, to look like a strong leader and a decisive man of action. But instead, you opted to go the route of looking like Joe Biden. Dithering, cowardly, indecisive to a fault, not sure where he is half the time. So it's sure good to know that we as a nation can sleep easy at night knowing we've got a steady hand on the tiller of the ship of state. A leader who, if a hostile invader ingresses our skies, he will stand around with his thumb up his ass for a good 96 hours or so while he decides what the hell he wants to do about it. But wait, says the president, doing what I assume he thinks is spin control. I actually told him to shoot that thing down on Wednesday, but they didn't want to. They wanted to wait until it was over the water. Oh well. Joe? This is your attempt to make things better? This is how you're putting the lipstick on the pig? By saying the military just ignored your goofy ass when you gave them a direct order? I feel like we need to have a talk about what Commander-in-Chief means. Commander-in-Chief means that when you order your forces to engage and destroy a target, it's not a polite request to maybe do it this weekend if you have some extra time. It means engage and destroy the fucking target, for fuck's sake. And about this whole thing of, well, we didn't want to shoot it down over land because it might endanger somebody on the ground. What part of Montana do you idiots not understand? It just so happens that I myself have driven across much of Montana just within the past few years, from Bozeman to Little Bighorn and back, 200 miles each way. And you know what one finds oneself thinking when one drives hundreds of miles across Montana? You think, holy shit, we haven't seen another living creature for over an hour and a half. No other cars on the road, no birds, no animals, no evidence of human artifice except the car you're in and the road you're driving on. But we couldn't shoot down Fang 1. Yeah, I took the liberty of naming the balloon, I hope that's okay. Because it might land on somebody? In Montana? In the most sparsely populated region of the entire contiguous United States? I ain't no fancy professional mathematician or anything, but even still I have taken the liberty of formulating Curmudgeon's first theorem of aerial homeland defense, and it goes like this. If you shot down one Chinese spy balloon for every single man, woman, and child in Montana, the chances of any one of them actually landing on a person would still be statistically indistinguishable from zero. Remember when we deorbited Skylab back in the 70s? It landed in the middle of the Australian outback, and it killed an unfortunate cow. And hitting that cow was like a 1,000,000,000 to 1 shot. The universe clearly did not like that cow. The point being, we deorbit objects from space all the time. We have been doing it for decades. Derelict satellites, spent rocket stages, defunct space stations, what have you name it. And we can predict with an incredible degree of precision where the object is going to impact the surface. If we want to splash a satellite down in the middle of the Indian Ocean at certain coordinates of latitude and longitude, we can get pretty damn close. We can either hit the bullseye or near to it. And yet, with the biggest military budget in the history of the entire universe, we're powerless to bring down a stupid Chinese balloon in an unpopulated area of a mostly unpopulated state? Our best scientists and most advanced mainframe computers can't figure out the trajectory of what will happen if we poke a hole in a bag of gas? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Joe Biden administration. May we all be so fortunate as to survive their reign, but I'm not crazy about our chances, frankly. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where I do my part for climate change by using a diesel generator to charge my hybrid car. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I'm your eponymous host and humble servant. And maybe it's just me, but every so often there will be a visual image that makes me stop and think, all right, that right there is going to be the defining image of the Joe Biden presidency. There was falling up the airplane stairs. There was falling off the bicycle. There was being led around the White House lawn by the Easter Bunny. There was checking his watch as the caskets of dead servicemen were being offloaded from the airplane. Getting caught with a note card that tells him how to enter a room and sit down. And I could go on for quite some time, obviously, but I trust you get the point. But I think it just may be the image of this dumb Chinese spy balloon loitering over our territory for days and days without a care in the world that comes to define the all-consuming incompetence of President Joseph R. Biden Jr. As for China, hell, after an open invitation like this, I'm surprised they don't have their bombers in the air already. When you've established the precedent that you can overfly hostile territory and the enemy will mostly just point and stare and take 4 days to formulate a response, you would have to be stupid not to attack, frankly. But it turns out we might have had this thing all wrong. I've been working my sources all weekend, and there are reports coming out of Beijing that this wasn't actually a surveillance overflight at all, and it's all just a huge misunderstanding. What happened was, this was anonymous Chinese donor testing out a new environmentally friendly way of remote delivering this month's giant bag of cash to the Penn Biden Center for something that totally isn't money laundering. And even though the botched handling of this incident is just about as bad as a man can botch a thing, since he can't help being Joe Biden, at the same time, this balloon was really kind of a blessing for a man who 1 week ago today was embroiled in a classified document scandal that was getting bigger and more sordid by the day. But the beautiful balloon sure seems to have nipped that whole thing in the bud, doesn't it? I know we often joke about the fact that our elected leaders and the fake news media like to try and distract us with metaphorical, bright, shiny objects. But in this case, it was a more literal application of the same technique. Look, up in the sky! Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, by God! It's Fang 1! Look at her floating up there so majestically, and keep looking until you forget all about any troves of classified documents that may have been at Joe Biden's house, and Joe Biden's other house, and Joe Biden's beach house, and Joe Biden's office, and Joe Biden's other office. We were getting a new tranche of classified documents practically every single day, and then, like literal manna from the heavens, comes redemption in the form of Fang 1. I have heard a lot of people referring to this as a Sputnik moment, and I think I'm not really very crazy about that analogy. The first and most obvious difference is that Sputnik was the world's first spacecraft, and it was deployed by a country that was supposed to be decades away from being capable of such things, while Fang 1 is just a balloon in the sky. The technology that keeps that thing afloat is late 18th century technology. The Montgolfier brothers could have just as well built that frickin' thing in 1795. Sputnik was a world-changing technological achievement. This is not. This is just Chairman Xi giving the stone-cold salute to Joe Biden because he knows Joe Biden won't do anything to him. But there's another sense in which this incident is very much like Sputnik, and that is that Americans don't like the idea of being aerially surveilled by hostile foreign nations who mean to do us harm. Up until October of 1957, when Sputnik launched, it was commonly assumed by most Americans, private citizens, elected officials, military leaders alike, that if the Soviets wanted to launch a nuclear first strike, they would have to send heavy bombers over our homeland, bombers that we would have a reasonable chance of detecting and engaging and destroying before they ever reached their target. And this was kind of a non-starter anyway, because there were no Soviet air bases outside Europe, and their heavy bombers didn't have even a third of the range that was required to reach our airspace. But Sputnik changes all of that in an instant. When you watch the interviews that were done that evening with various men and women on the street, the terror that those people were feeling is palpable, because the math doesn't take much figuring out. If they've got a rocket that's big enough to get a payload into orbit, that means they've got a rocket that's more than big enough to hit any city in the Western Hemisphere with a thermonuclear warhead. And that's a hell of a thing to try and get your head around when you woke up this morning thinking the Russians were a nation of backward Asiatic dirt farmers who can't make a flushing toilet. And there was a lot of anger directed toward the government and toward President Eisenhower in particular. The Russians, they got the atom bomb because they stole it from us. Then they got the hydrogen bomb because they stole it from us. Then they stole sufficient numbers of our rocket designs to make Sputnik and ICBMs possible. And at this point, people start thinking, and not unreasonably, why does our government keep failing to protect our most important secrets from our most lethal adversary? And how many American cities are going to get wiped off the map because we keep getting caught with our ass hanging out? Meanwhile, back in the present day, those were the same types of things a lot of Americans were wondering last week as they watched Fang 1 drifting across the entire continent without any sort of intervention from the U.S. military. If anything, it's really a rather fitting microcosm of what dickheads like Joe Biden have been allowing China to do to us for over 30 years now. Because let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, if they had shot down Fang 1 over a populated area and it landed on somebody, there's about a 2 in 7 chance that person would be a Chinese spy. If they shot it down over a university campus, those odds improved to about 9 in 7. Seriously, if Thanos showed up with the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped out of existence all the Chinese spies who are currently residing here in the U.S., millions of people would disappear at once. If he snapped away the Chinese spies and the illegal aliens, the whole country would transform into a ghost town. For all of this century and then some, we haven't just outsourced whole entire U.S. industries to China, though we most assuredly have done that. But we've done them the additional favor of allowing them to basically send unlimited numbers of intelligence operatives over here to infest our colleges and our universities and our government bureaucracies and our congressional campaigns, even our corporate boardrooms. And you know what we really desperately need right now? We need another Joe McCarthy. We need somebody in the Senate who is willing to stand up and say, look, our entire capital city is overflowing with communist spies, and it's about damn time we started doing the work of exposing them and the American officials they've been working for. We know that Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy driving her car for upwards of 10 years. We know Eric Swalwell gained his seat in Congress largely due to the efforts of the Chinese spy he was having sex with. But does anybody really think those are the only two? Does anybody really think there aren't dozens or hundreds of Chinese spies operating on Capitol Hill inside congressional staffs right now at this very moment? Does anybody really think Eric Swalwell is the only guy who's been installed in Congress by the Chinese Communist Party? Aren't we going to have to rip off the Band-Aid at some point and try to get a true accounting of how many people in our Congress are compromised by our hostile foreign adversary? And wouldn't that be a good thing to know? Shouldn't everybody want to know that? And maybe that's the lesson we can start to learn from the flight of Fang 1. Maybe this is the thing that slaps the country across its collective face and makes it realize, wow, we have really been letting China get away with a lot of shit, and maybe that's not the best idea in the world. I mean, look at this. They can just park a big stupid balloon in the sky and surveil everything we're doing, and our leaders don't do jack shit about it. Not until 4 days later when they've realized it's a political liability. But do they give a damn about China surveilling us? It sure doesn't seem that way. It seems like they were more than happy to let Fang 1 complete its mission without any undue interference. And they wound up getting thwarted by a local Montana newspaper photographer who saw a weird thing in the sky and happened to have a telephoto lens in his truck. I guess it's strangely fitting that we were just talking early last week about the Gary Powers U-2 incident, which I think has more in common with this incident than Sputnik ever will, make no mistake about that. And I swear to God I didn't have advanced warning that this balloon thing was going to happen like the very next day after I was talking about that. Sometimes the universe just goes out of its way to make me look prescient. What can I say? And just how did the Soviets react when we started flying U-2s over their territory? By trying to destroy them. They launched missiles at every single one. They sent up fighters to engage every single one. They lost more than a few men in the attempt. But they damn well kept trying until they succeeded in shooting one down. And they sure as hell never spent 4 days paralyzed into inaction trying to figure out what to do. When your enemy is attempting to aerially surveil you, you blow him out of the sky. Most leaders don't need this explained to them. Joe Biden, apparently, is the exception. Joe Biden is such a weak president, he makes Jimmy Carter look like Lou Ferrigno. If dithering and prevarication was an Olympic sport, Joe Biden would be the bastard gay love child of Jesse Owens and Michael Phelps. If cowardice and indecision were the World Series, Joe Biden would be the 27 Yankees. And if puckering up and kissing China's ass was a game of basketball, Joe Biden would be Yao Ming. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. I will see you Wednesday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.